Thank you very much for coming to another program in our free, the Friends Free Community Program series. And this is our third Authors Night, local Authors Night. And I'm very pleased to introduce Fonway Collins, we got that right? Mm-hmm. From Byfield, and Michael Schiavone from Gloucester. And before I do that though, I just want to mention next month's event is going to be not an author's event, it's going to be e-reader night. We're going to have Ruth, our library director, give a little tutorial on how to get free digital content for your e-readers. You know, the libraries also don't have books and CDs and DVDs. We have the digital content you can check out as well. So I would encourage everyone to bring your iPads, Nooks, and Kindles, and Ruth is going to show you how to set them up to borrow digital content. Great, so without further ado, I believe our first speaker will be the following.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, the Friends of the Georgetown Peabody Public Library, and for all of you for being here. And I'm honored to be here with Michael Schiavone at this table reading. And so tonight I'm going to talk about my debut novel, Echolocation, which was published in March of this year from Engine Books, which is a small independent publisher out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And this is my first published novel, not the first novel that I've written. And I've been writing for a long time. I started when I was a child and wrote all through college and through my 20s and 30s. So it's been something that I've been dreaming of for a long time for this to happen. And I'm so happy that it finally has. In the past couple of months, I've been traveling around and visiting libraries and bookstores and going to different cities with this book. And tonight, this is actually the final destination of my reading tour, such as it is. So I'm really happy to share that with all of you. I also go to book clubs and all of that. So if any of you have book clubs that you're interested in me visiting, I'm happy to do that. So what I thought I'd do to begin was tell you a little bit of a story of how this novel came to be, and then read you the first chapter, which is quite brief, and then turn it over to Amy and Michael. So Echolocation began as a short story. I wrote the first two chapters started as one short story that I wrote to go to a writer's workshop in Portland, Oregon. It's called the Tin House Writers Workshop, and Tin House is a literary magazine, and they have this workshop that they do as well. And the author I was going to work with as my workshop leader is Dorothy Allison, who's a very well-known writer. She wrote Bastard Out of Carolina as one of her best-known books. It became a movie. And I've always looked up to her writing. I had worked with her a little bit before. So I was really excited to go and work with her. So I wrote this story for the workshop. And in the workshop, the way it worked was we would go over a couple of people's stories each day as a group. And she chose the order of the stories. And as the week wore on, it wasn't my story, it wasn't my story, it wasn't my story. And we get to the last day, and finally it's my story, the last story and the last day. And I think, wow, she must really think this thing stinks. And she's just gonna, let me down easy and send us on our way and blah, blah, blah. Instead, she really loved it, which blew me away. And I was thrilled by that and excited by that, but also kind of terrified too. Because what she said was, I think you need to go on with these characters. I don't think they end here. I think you should write a novel with them. So I thought about that, and I left there. And I thought, yeah, maybe someday I will do that. Maybe someday. This was 6 years ago. And I got home. My husband and I went on vacation. We went up to the Adirondack Mountains where I grew up, and we went to the lake where I grew up. And my mother had died 5 years before that, and I brought her ashes with me because I hadn't really let go of her, or not that you ever do, but I felt like this is time to let go of her. So I brought her ashes with me, and on a cloudy, rainy day, we went out in the lake in a canoe. It was very windy, and the wind kept pushing us back. And we brought her ashes out to this place where it's a marsh and nobody can build any houses, where the loons go. And I let them go. And then a part of me opened up. And I felt that something big was going to happen. And I felt a lot of relief and happiness. So we went home, and then a couple months later, I started to get very sick. I was tired. I didn't feel right. My head didn't feel right. And I thought, this is it. This is it. The other shoe is dropping. Life's not that easy. And then I started to get nauseous. I didn't know what was happening. And then the alarm for the carbon monoxide detector went off. And I was working at home at the time, freelance writing, and I called my husband. I said, this thing's going off. I don't know what's happening. I've been feeling sick. I've been feeling tired. I've Googled. It sounds like I'm dying here. He said, well, do what it says in the instructions. So I did what it says in the instructions, and you push the button, and it goes beep, 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 and then they say call 911. So I called 911, and the emergency vehicle came, the fire truck, the ambulance, the police car. This was in New Hampshire. We had 5 swirling lights in our driveway. So I'm out of the house. My dog's out there with me. They get me on the ambulance. They said, yes, your heart rate is up, but you seem to be okay. Let's wait here. They're going to go through your house. They go through my house, and they come out, and the fire chief comes up to me, and he says, yes, there is something wrong. Your battery is low. So he changed my battery, so it was like the most expensive battery change in the history of that town. So then that night, I was cooking seafood for dinner, and I started to feel sick again. And I called one of my friends who's got 4 children, and she said, you idiot, go and get a pregnancy test. And so that's what I did. And a few days before my 39th birthday, which was when I was going to stop trying to have children, I found out I was pregnant for the first time. So then I said, I need to write this book now. I can't sit and wait on it. So I spent the next 9 months working on this book. And that's why I call my son my co-author. And before the book came out, he kept saying, Mommy, when's our book coming out? When's our book coming out? So in less than a month, he'll be 5. And so 5 years ago, I was just finishing up this book. And now here it is. What I'd like to do now is read you the first chapter. Putting on my serious glasses. When the slip of saw through trunk is buttery, liquid, and verging on gentle, Geneva was moved to tears. Her body felt as though it were cutting through the tree, the rings, the history of droughts and hailstorms, the sap that could have been her own blood dripping, weeping at her feet. It felt like a betrayal, this taking of saw to tree. But Clint was out of work again. They needed the money. She was down by the quarry, just off the old logging road, claiming a patch of ground Auntie Marie had given her for a wedding present, her dowry. Don't tell him, though, Marie suggested about the wooded acre. Keep that land to yourself. Geneva had thought of using the trees for sugaring as Auntie Marie had proposed, but now it was too late. She was taking the trees for cheap firewood to sell to tourists at a roadside stand. Such a waste. The tinny song of wood thrush carried above other birds' calls. Eerie and mechanical, it was her favorite bird song. as if her fractured heart called out into the world. She paused before moving on to the next tree, listened above the idle of her saw while the song intensified, grew frantic. Warning? Was it warning her? No. The thrush was singing as it always had done and always would do. But she felt off that morning, a blue shakiness she couldn't otherwise explain. It didn't have anything to do with the fact that Clint hadn't come home the night before, that their electric bill was overdue. It was something else, something blurry around the edges. When she looked back on this day later, all she would think was, I should have known. She left her dog, Mr. Pink, behind that day because he'd gone gimpy in his left hind leg, and she thought maybe her bad feeling was about him. Another mistake she would later realize. Her bad feeling had nothing to do with Mr. Pink, curled up on an old Afghan by the wood stove. His leg was bad and he didn't have much more time to live, but he would not die that day. He would spend his day warm and comfortable, waiting for his next meal. As always, she checked the gauge of her old truck before she left home, noting that she had enough gas to drive to the trees and back. This was her biggest mistake. She would need that gas and then some. A full tank of gas would have made things turn out entirely different. Entirely. It was adrenaline that saved Geneva, and pressure from the tourniquet she tied around her upper arm, using her belt, her one good hand, and her teeth. After the saw kicked back and cut through the flesh of her left forearm, she sensed more than knew that she needed to move, that she needed to ignore the white lights flickering around her eyes and ignore especially the pain and the gushing blood. She needed to move. So that's what she'd done, tied the tourniquet and run to the truck, hopped in it, and drove toward town, toward help. When the truck ran out of gas partway there, she didn't sit and wait for someone to notice. She got out of that truck and she ran like hell down the road, trailing pools and splatters of blood. She remembered thinking that the blood was an odd color on the pavement, iridescent like the tail of a My Little Pony. She marveled at her own blood as she ran, the leprechaun color of it, granting wishes. Terry Plunker saw her first and loaded her on his ATV in search of help. It took some doing, though. By that time, she was in shock and babbling about the miracle of her blood. It will save you, she said. I have seen the truth in it. He knew women like this. He knew their kind, which is why Plunker was gentle and eased her into getting on the ATV. Set still now, he said as he moved the vehicle forward. You set still. Looked like a goddamn horror movie is what he said after they got her safely to the clinic. Like that Carrie on the night of the prom. So much frickin' blood. So much blood, in fact, Plunker nearly passed out himself at the sight of her. Her arm was cut clean off, he said. Clean off. He sounded almost impressed. Like he didn't know a man alive who could have survived what she had. Almost like he believed her arm would grow right back out of that stump. Regardless of everyone's best intentions, though, most of the arm could not be saved. And so beautiful Geneva would henceforth be known as one-armed Geneva. Still beautiful, but flawed. Clint felt so bad about his wife's disfigurement and how, had he been a better man, he might have prevented it. That he went down the street to the funeral home, met with the undertaker, and picked out a top-of-the-line casket. White, silver-handled, with pink silk interior. There was no viewing, but there was a small service at the graveyard led by Father O'Connor. Geneva was there, dressed in black, mourning, and as they lowered the baby-sized casket that encased what was once her living arm, complete with the engagement ring and wedding band still on the finger, into the ground, Geneva dropped a shovelful of dirt on it, looked right at Clint and said, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Later she vowed those would be the last words she ever said to him. Ever.
Different.
And that's the end of my chapter.
Follow that act.
I'll try. A lot of similar sentiments. I can relate to what you were saying. Like for me, it's this having this physically here in front of me. It's still kind of astounding because to get it to this, to get to here took a lot, and it's a long process that goes back like over a decade. Not just this book, but the whole writing process and learning about the business and the industry. But I guess what you would call, I heard this, Hunter S. Thompson described himself as a binge writer, and I think that's what I am because I'll go long periods of time without writing at all, totally not, involved with the writing community or workshops or anything, and then when I am writing, I'm very much so writing. It's very organized, structured, and disciplined. So I go through different stages. And I've been writing since probably college, it's about 18 years ago. That's when I started. That's when I took a creative writing class. I didn't grow up as like an avid reader. I didn't grow up really interested in creative writing or anything like that. I was a pretty bad student. I didn't like to read. And it wasn't until I got to college and I took a creative writing class and he gave us a short story collection, Where I'm Calling From by Raymond Carver was it. And I was blown away that I could actually read books and take away so much because sort of what was forced upon me, I think, I just couldn't relate to, and so I just had this general idea that books were sort of something you had to do, had to read, had to just to get through school. So my whole outlook changed once I got to college. I would consider myself a short story writer. That's what I started to do. That's where I've had sort of my success. However, short stories are very hard to sell as a collection, almost, I think, impossible. But at least no agent's really interested to hear from you if you have a short story collection and nothing else. And I speak from experience. So this book I started in 2007. This is also my first novel. And when people ask me, once I sold it to the publisher, like yours, it's a small publisher. They're out of New York. They do 12 books a year, one per month. So this came out in, I can't remember anymore, September, last November. But I finished it, the rough draft, in 2007, and spent many, tons of rewrites, to the point where you don't want to even look at the book anymore. I was just nauseous with it. So, where was I going with this? But so when this came out in last year, it was really the first. I've had stories published and they're in journals and they're amongst other stories and you're mixed in with other authors, but this was the sort of first, its own sort of piece that was mine. So what I felt was tremendous relief because to put all that time into it, more so than excitement, like getting a book published, to me it was relief because I put so much time into it, so much sacrifice, and it takes a toll on others. I have a son and a wife, and it's hard on them when you write. It's very, at least for me, it's a very selfish pursuit. And so since I've had my son, actually, I've cut back considerably because I just can't, I'm having trouble figuring out how to do both. But anyway, this is a family saga. That's how I would describe it. It's a story of a mother and a son, and the book came to me as I wrote it. I didn't have an outline. I didn't have really any idea where I was going to go with it. It started really with just some basic imagery, which is sort of how all my work starts. I just have a picture in my mind of something. It could, in this case, it was a moving box, like a pod is what they're called. People, when they move, they'll fill a pod up with their stuff, and then the company comes and collects that pod and moves it. So that image was what was in my head, was a pod in a driveway. And then it started from there, and then it started with this woman who's my protagonist. And as I wrote, it came alive. And like I said, this is my third novel. the first one to see light, though. The first one was terrible. I'm glad it's not in existence. And I'm glad this was before there was really email and internet, because nobody has it. It's gone. It was really bad. But you know, I don't know many people whose first effort really would be good. That's pretty amazing. I think for me, rewriting's everything. Yeah, it's really hard to get it right in the first try, especially a book. And I was really young. This was before I even had a real job. So, and then the second one I wrote was pretty good, but it wasn't long enough. It was kind of like a novella, which is kind of a strange, as a first-time writer, a hard thing to sell. So I got an agent with that novella, but she couldn't sell it. And then I did this, and this is still short for a novel. It's like 65,000 words. And I sent this out to, and I have the list, 75 agents. 25 of them responded at all, and one took it. So when people say, "Oh, I sent it out to 5 places, no one wants it, I'm so depressed," it's like you gotta send it out. You can't stop. I mean, it's you know, you gotta try everything. And then my agent, sent it out to 25 publishers, starting with the very big fish. You know, and then this was the last one she was gonna try, and then that was gonna be my third go around, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. So they took it, so that was great. So that's that. It's, you know, it's hard getting published. It's very hard. So again, I'm very grateful this is in front of me. It's like I feel like I can die and you know, I got something done, because I put a lot of time into writing, and it's like so thankless sometimes, because you're just alone in a room and you're like, I should be outside, I should be at the beach, I should be doing something productive, I should be interacting with people, and instead of sitting in this room, you know, staring at a screen. So it's nice to have something to show for it. Do I have any money to show for it? No. But you know, it's nice to have this. So I could read a little bit. My chapters are a little longer, so I know when I read the first chapter at my book launch, it takes like 20 minutes, so I'm not going to do that. But it is chronological, so I don't want to like read something from way up. So I'll just read a little bit. Basically, this first chapter, I'll read part of, introduces everyone. This takes place, basically, in my mind, it takes place in Rockport. I changed all the names, but it really is Rockport. And it's not a specific house in Rockport. It's sort of a combination of houses in my mind. But it's Rockport and Gloucester is the area I'm talking about. And we have a single mother and her teenage son. And in this scene, what we're finding out is the single mother's estranged husband, who is the father of the teenage son, he has just died. And so everything's coming to a head, basically. So I'll start there, and there is some foul language, so if anyone's offended, you should leave. But I'll try not to hit all those words. All right, call me when you land. He's found dead in Nevada. Your information was in his backpack, the deputy says. Katie holds the line. Last she heard, Craig was in Montana. A few months ago, he'd sent them a sunny postcard from Bridger Bowl. He usually sends 1 or 2 a year. She's repeatedly sorry as she pushes those cards under CJ's door, but she doesn't want to be one of those mothers who hides the father from the child. The deputy clears his throat. Where? Katie finally asks, removing her smock. She stands up and rinses her dirty paintbrushes, the water a gray, gloomy color. Mr. Hunter was discovered in a motel room here in Carson City, the deputy says. An apparent heart attack. They're still investigating. At 46, she asks? Katie hears a toilet flush in the background. While she's imagined this phone call many times before, heart attack hadn't played through her mind. Buried by an avalanche, squashed by a tree trunk, frozen on the wrong side of a ski boundary, always on a mountain, always fierce. There's a storage bin here, the deputy continues, a pod. He left you the key. He tells her instructions were written on the back of a restaurant placemat they found folded up in 4s inside his backpack. What's inside, she asks, picturing broken skis, bent poles and snowshoes, a container full of donations. We'll send it out tomorrow, he says. Here? There, he confirms, New Quay, Massachusetts, for you and Calvin. For you and Calvin, she mumbles away from the phone. Katie pours herself a glass of Grand Marnier from the bottle she keeps behind the gallery mats. When Craig left for good 15 years ago, CJ wasn't even CJ then. He was 9-month-old Calvin James. Her son claims to remember his father's hands, like sandpaper, CJ said, but he was less than a year old the afternoon Craig drove away, her mint green Rossignol still strapped to the roof rack of his truck. So where's Craig going, she asks. Is he inside too? His mother's handling the body. She hangs up the phone. When it rings again, she leaves it to her voicemail. The ice cubes crackle and snap as the sweet orange liqueur settles into the tumbler. Circling her calloused index finger around the rim of the glass, she pauses before taking her first drink of the day. As always, Katie waits, an instant of consideration before the plunge. One last chance to dump the contents down the drain. Later on, she'll reflect upon this moment and wonder why she didn't just drive to the gym or clean the inside of the microwave. She could have stuffed her face with brownies instead, but once the drink is poured, all other options seem absurd. As Katie's lips now touch the glass, she reminds herself she can make a different choice next time. His mother's handling the body, she says to the cat. Of course she isn't acquainted with Craig's mother. Katie never met anyone who really knew him. No brothers and sisters, no friends. The poor woman probably has no idea she has a grandson. Leaning back in her late father's brown leather chair, Katie considers leaving CJ a note on his pillow. She could even ask Walter to deliver the news while she stays in the studio. In fact, she doesn't have to tell her son anything at all, but when he finds out, it will give him yet another reason to resent her. Outside the window, Katie watches the workers finish removing debris from last night's ice storm. The streets strewn with trash, sea vines, dirt, and sand. The sky's cold silver. When the New England wind chill goes below zero, she gets headaches, the kind aspirin can't resolve. Apparently, wind took out Mr. Kashgarian's cherry tree across the street. Katie's view now altered. One man in an orange suit reattaches a sagging telephone line to Mrs. Seaton's house, his thick body dangling by a belt strap. Most of the crew huddles together, a swarm of cigarettes and styrofoam cups, their shift ending with the February light. Her dad would call these guys working stiffs, but Katie admires these men and their guts. 1 second. She hears the front door bang open. Against an earlier promise, Katie adds another finger's worth of Grand Marnier to her glass, careful to tread quietly across the studio floor. Her glasses streak black from the paint still on her fingertips. From the kitchen, the blender churns as she envisions the lipstick red potion of creatine powder and fruit punch, one of 3 daily doses her son guzzles down. With an ear to the door, Katie listens as CJ rummages through the refrigerator. She pictures him wolfing down cold cuts and hard-boiled eggs, cottage cheese and pickles. He eats like a pregnant woman, chronically hungry. Cabinets frantically open and close, drawers are slammed shut. He can't seem to do anything quietly, and not until Katie hears his heavy footsteps on the stairwell does she spit the ice cubes from her mouth. Above her head, she can hear the Ramones blaring from the stereo in his room, an upgrade from the German industrial music he played for 3 months straight. Katie can remember the way music struck a nerve when she was his age, how vital it was to her existence. Now it's just a distraction while she drives. She'd like to tell him that a portion of her own teenage years were consumed by the Ramones' punk anthems, but a remark like that would most likely aggravate him. Whenever she tries to reach out, CJ just rolls his eyes and waits for her to leave. Katie grabs a hockey stick and taps the ceiling, his floor, with the butt end of the shaft. A collection of little divots from previous strikes decorate the white plaster above her head. The volume eventually drops, then silence. Some nights this is the only exchange between mother and son, one she's come to depend on. She used to ask him what he learned in school, how the biology test went, what girls he liked, but routine questions are now invasive, and so she's stopped. When he wants to speak, she'll listen. Just please tell me if anything bad is ever happening, she said recently. Promise me that. Katie forces down her drink as seagulls cry outside the window. As she leaves the studio behind, her courage shrinks. Walking up the staircase, she hears CJ counting out reps. 42, 43, 44. He makes it to 47 push-ups before his body drops. Next, he'll work through sit-ups, then more push-ups. The routine can last over an hour. Usually, Katie's in the studio painting while he's exercising, his regimen the soundtrack of her artistic process. She pauses in front of his door and brushes the gray cat hair from her sweater. Her throat is dry. As if freshly introduced on a daily basis, Katie is nervous in front of her son. She and Craig certainly hadn't imagined puberty when they mingled beneath the sheets. They hadn't considered any harm. CJ finally opens up, 6 feet and muscular in the doorframe. Vein trails map his forearms. He hasn't cut his hair all winter, the stringy black bangs almost long enough to shield his eyes. His chin is dried out from too much acne cream, his face a blend of the two of them, his father's blue eyes, her nose and ears, Craig's cocky smile when CJ allows it to appear. A faint shadow of hair shows beneath his white undershirt. Not very long ago, his chest was bare. How suddenly CJ had transformed, how severe he'd become. Katie remembers the morning he turned 12, how his feet had grown in size overnight, instantly clownish on his gawky frame. Soon after, the hairs on his legs had darkened, sweet blonde giving way to that awful, primitive black. As his jaw widened, the eyes narrowed. Top to bottom, he had shed his skin. Top to bottom, CJ had hardened. Like a gallery exhibit, Katie had stared curiously at her son, amazed and alarmed she'd born such a creature. Before puberty, he used her shower on the first floor, only a towel wrapped around his waist as he passed through her bedroom to the bath. Now he was suddenly pissed off he only had a toilet and sink on the second floor. Katie told him she'd be happy to add a shower stall to his water closet, but he'd have to give up hockey, cable, and steak tips for a year to cover construction costs. So he became accustomed to using the third floor bathroom where the tiles are moldy and Walter hangs his plants. CJ, likely as upset as Katie over her son's bodily invasion. I'll just leave it there. That's it.
So, any questions for
I'll start. Both of you have teased it with some character development. You had said, Mafani, that originally you just wrote a short piece and the author said develop them, grow them on. And as I listened to Michael, it sounds to me like your novel is going to develop around this woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you both talk a little bit about how you develop character? What's your process? How did you grow the character on? How did you conceive your novel based around the character?
Mine started with these two women, Geneva, who I introduced, and then the woman who grew up as her sister, Sherry. They aren't really sisters. And then there's Auntie Marie, who I vaguely introduced. She's the woman who raised them. She's actually Sherry's aunt. So I have quite a few characters in my novel, and I wrote it in the third person, but each of the characters is developed underneath that umbrella. They each have kind of a distinct voice within it. And they're all based on people who I grew up with, people that I knew growing up in upstate New York. And people knowing me now say, how do you know these crazy people? And, cutting off arms and, riding ATVs and guns and all these things happen, but it's just that I grew up in a very rural, some poverty, but a lot of kind of a rugged place to grow up. And so they're all a part of me and a part of the people that I knew, and that's where kind of my passion for writing comes from too, is those people and those voices, and my family and my mother's family, and understanding those voices. So it's really just something organic for me that comes from within. If I can't feel them and feel empathy for them and be interested in them, then I can't imagine that anybody else can, so I don't want to write about them. So for me, that's how I develop them, is from within and from my history.
Yeah, my protagonist, she's a 39-year-old woman, and the story, it's her story, although it's about her and her son, but it's really about her. And the way she developed was just over a long period of time of thinking about her on a daily basis. And she began, and I touched on this earlier, but she began to inform me where the story was going and what she was about. And you know, she is a collection of personalities, of real people that I know. But the beauty is I can also, you know, I could create it how I want to. So it's, while I have real personalities, I'm shaping her in my, you know, the way I want to. But really, I find when you spend a lot of time thinking about one person and how they perceive the world, I know her perfectly, you know. So it got to the point where she can write the book herself, and I'm doing the work as the author. But really, it's a shared experience. It's really strange. Because they become alive, and like you say, I have to have empathy and I have to be able to relate. Otherwise, yeah, your story's not successful. I mean, it starts with your characters. At least, you know, literary fiction, it really is about character-driven stories. You know, and a lot of the interviews and stuff I did, they're like, well, it's weird. You know, you did a woman. Well, it is third person, first of all. If it was first person, I think that would have been a little difficult. But being third person, honestly, I don't think the gender mattered at all. I don't think that was an issue, because to me it's really just, you know, I'm dealing with human emotion, you know, and whether you're a woman or a man, you're a parent is a parent, and I think you have the same feelings, you know. So, like I say, after spending, you know, hours every day writing this character in this book and thinking, you know, you think about them beyond the writing, you're thinking about them while you're driving, while you're in the shower, while you're doing anything, you know. I'm always thinking, what's she wearing? What is she looking at? How would she talk to this person? What would she think of that person? And then, you know, she changed. She changed over time, and that's what allowed for the arc. You know, that's what allowed for, you know, the development of character, and, you know, the character change, and that type of it. So the story and the character develops with me, and, you know, as the process goes. That's why I don't know how you can write a book really too fast, because it's, you know, you need the time to get to know them, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So.
There's a sudden change in your book at the very beginning in her life. But I presume that as the story progresses, she comes to terms with that, or is that not something that's really important in what goes on?
It's not necessarily, well, there's a lot of plot that goes on here, and lots of machinations and things that she has to do with her body to move the plot forward. It's important because she's always been known for her exterior by everybody outside of her. So what it does with her arm is teaches her to grow in a different way, or teaches her to maybe perceive herself in a different way. But it's also metaphorical for other stuff. Well, I don't want to give away too much, because there's a lot that goes on, but that's not the main thing. That's not the main bad thing that happens, unfortunately. There's a stream of bodies that follows. The dismemberment is only the beginning. Sorry.
Well, I've read Call Me.
Oh, you did?
I have, and I enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
And the change is very gradual, but it was hard. I was amazed that you could do a woman so well, because it seemed quite authentic.
Well, you were a teenage boy with a mother. I mean,
Yeah, that part.
There you go. There you go.
I wasn't hostile to my mother, but I didn't want to share a lot with her, and so it really rang true.
Yeah.
The relationship.
There you have it, right. So I was able to, when I was a teenager, I was only thinking about myself, but now I could see, like, oh, my poor mother.
Yeah.
But, you know, and this isn't
She
autobiographical,
was a saint.
but it's like, and now that I'm a parent, it's like what they have to deal with, and it's like, now it's payback. But, yeah, so, yeah, because I could imagine what she went through, and, you know, and to me, it's just, it's nice that I think now, and, you know, my mother's still alive, and she got to read this, and, you know, and my mother doesn't drink or anything, and my character is an alcoholic. So I was like, Mom, you know. Everyone's saying to my mom, like, when she was at the readings, you know, they thought it's her, and it's like, it's not, and that's the thing, you know, it's fiction, so that's just my character's flaw. But yeah, I think it's just an interesting relationship, teenagers and you know, especially a single parent, it's so hard for them because they, you know, they're like often the enemy because they're the ones that are present, and it's the one that's not present that gets a break sometimes, it seems, because they're not there on a daily basis doing the discipline and, you know, doing the dirty work. So it's very right for fiction, I found. That's why for me all my fiction's about usually two characters. You know, I'll have a lot of characters, but it's about two characters and just how they interact, and the conflict and the resolution and everything like that. That's what interests me. So it's sort of the domestic side of life.
Yeah. I wouldn't compare you with Richard Russo, but it sounds like upstate New York characters.
Yeah, that's
I haven't used read a snatch, but
yeah, it's absolutely upstate New York, because that's where, well, I'm from Montreal originally, but my family, when I was 10, we moved to this rural town in upstate New York, so that's typically when I write a novel, that's where I go, because that's where my heart and soul is, and it's also a dramatic place.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's rugged, and it's difficult to live there. It's difficult for women to live there. So my female characters are very important to me in this book. Their male characters too are important to me, but because they have to be so strong to get through, or to embrace their weaknesses too, I guess. But they also have to form a bond with each other, which is important too. Where I grew up, and it was funny recently, I went back up there, I went to a college at Plattsburgh State, which is way up, and they had me back as a visiting writer to read, and it was wonderful, and my college professors were there, but then that was 45 minutes away from where I grew up, and a bunch of my high school girlfriends came, and my high school English teacher, and it was so moving and beautiful to have them there, but then afterwards we went out for a drink, and they're all saying, so who's Plunker? So where was the storm? You know, so everybody wanted like the inside of who's what. And you know, the truth is nobody's really in here, but there are bits and pieces of that have informed it, like you all, you know, in your own writing have found too. It's just, but so upstate New York's very important to me. It's where my heart is for sure. But this is where I live now. So this is I find it hard to write. I write short stories in New England, but I haven't yet gone to the novel place. I don't know why. It's like, because here's where I am, and I don't want to, I can't take away from it, because it's not where I grew up. I don't know, it's hard for me yet, because I'm living it still, I guess.
I wanted to carry that over to Michael. Could yours be set anywhere else, or is it's got to be Hardscrabble, Rockport, Gloucester?
I wonder, well, I guess I chose that. I started this book when I just moved here. We were living in the Southwest for a while, and we just moved back I was living in Rockport actually in my in-laws' house, because we didn't have a place to live yet. And that was the setting I was looking out the window, was at the Rockport Harbor. So it just it just seemed kind of natural to make it that, because I could see it and I could just, it was kind of a convenience factor, because I could describe everything because it was right in front of me. I didn't have to do any research, and it just made sense too. It felt like it made sense with the characters. It made sense sort of with the, you know, it's a seasonal book. I think it's about a year long, so and I break it up into, you know, winter, spring, summer, fall. So that made sense, you know, to go with the seasons and, you know, the changes, and it helped for me just being able to observe it on a daily basis and noticing the environment around here as a writer, instead of just as, you know, just living here, just really observing it. So being here just made it important. But, you know, I don't think it could have taken place anywhere else. No.
Mary says
No, it's appropriate. It's appropriate.
Parts are in Vermont too, right?
Yeah, so New England, it just seemed right.
I had a question about your technical process. So we actually had an author, Eve Perlman, come and talk about it. She writes her story.
Yeah.
But she uses a typewriter. So I was curious, I'm mad you don't use typewriter. I think you told me you use typewriter. But longhand,
I started writing stories when I was in college. Well, I started writing them when I was a child, so longhand, but then for creative writing classes in college, and that was in the 80s. So it was longhand and then typewriter. And I remember when I got my brother word processor, it was when I was writing my first novel as a senior in college. And again, like you said, I'm so glad nobody can ever get their hands on that because it was horrible. And when I got my brother word processor and could save stuff on disk and it would print out, it was like, oh, the rainbow and the pot of gold and the heavens opening up. It was like nirvana had happened because I didn't have to do the longhand and the typewriter and the whiting out and everything. So no, I don't do that. I write everything on my computer. I do write in a journal, and I do believe that there is something to writing longhand. It affects a certain part of your brain that opens up part of your creativity or your muse or whatever, but I typically write everything in a Word document on my computer or in Google Docs or whatever I can. That is where I do it. I can't do it any other way. I do print it out when I'm editing, and I think that's important, and reading aloud and look for typos or inconsistencies or anything that you won't notice as you're reading on a screen. You really do notice more things as it's printed out, or just even on a different screen, some other medium to see it. I do think you notice more. But yeah, computer all the way.
Yeah, the same. I when I was in high school, we still wrote all our term papers and everything by hand, and I think it was starting to shift then. That was in '92. But writing, I do everything on the computer. But like she said, the editing process, which is most of the process, I mean, is just rewriting. This is the best trick I ever learned, and this came from Pam Painter. She's a writer, and she lives in Boston and teaches at Emerson. And I took a class of hers, and once I did this, it made my stories just started to get published, and it's because it's a really good trick I recommend. But you write your story, and then it gets edited and what have you, and you go back to it. But on a computer, it's really easy. You can put the cursor where you want. You could locate where you want. But she said delete, start the whole thing over. So it's like when you so in other words, you have your story, and then you print it out. It's been corrected. Instead of editing it with the one on the screen, just start blank again, copying it over, because it sort of reintroduces you to the story again. And it was it's miraculous, and it's, for me, like, it changed everything. And it's a lot more time consuming, but almost not, because you get to the point of your story, I think, faster, because you're writing that sentence again, as opposed to just cutting and pasting out a word, which is kind of impersonal. You're being very technical if you're just cutting and pasting out a word rather than actually rewriting that sentence, saying it aloud to yourself. So I do that. I'll rewrite completely. I'll read aloud. I'll hang it up on the wall, and because you can see what it looks like. She taught us that too. It's the best class I ever took, ever, Pam Painter. And we cut up the stories, and you cut by scene, so you could have a real heavy scene, and you're like, wow, this is taking up all this space, and the other ones were like this big, and so you could sort of look at your story from physically against the wall, as opposed to just reading it, and you can see, oh, I'm top heavy here, or I've spent no time on this, and it's obviously because I don't want to. I'm afraid to go there, and so you can call yourself out on it, where just looking at the screen, I can't imagine if that's all you could do, because all you get is a snapshot.
Can I just ask you a question about it? So you have the document, and then you copy it from the document, or you copy it from memory?
Oh, no, okay, so this is strictly short story, because
Right,
the novel, I've done it by chapter, but, so you print your story out, right, and say it gets workshopped. And then what I would do is I'd collect everyone's input and write all over that. And, so I'd have it down to one copy, and then I'd have a bunch of notes. And then I would rewrite the story. I would start everything, I'd write the title again, I'd write my name again, and I'd just rewrite it,
Totally
copy
new
it.
that, yeah.
Yeah, so again, not from memory, because,
Yeah.
no, so I'm,
Yeah,
but, yeah, and it's her little thing, and, I've taken, I don't know, hundreds of courses, but, that did it.
that's cool. I
That
like
did it.
I'm gonna use that.
So and it made my stories better, because it's like.
Well, you're thinking like an editor, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just a writer.
Yeah.
I mean, you're thinking the way an editor would think about.
Yeah, and you're like, that doesn't sound right.
Right.
It just got me, I just all of a sudden improved, it seemed. I got, made the language tighter, it made everything a little more effective, and I hadn't done that before. I was, with the computer, it's really easy to just, not so much be lazy, but it's so efficient. It's so
Yeah.
incredibly efficient that you could lose out, in some other ways.
And you're talking about doing that with something that's been written once.
Yeah.
And it's in the edit.
Yeah, and I would do this 10 times for one story, but it's very, it works, But everyone's different,
Oh, yeah.
everyone does it different.
This isn't it, because you're tightening it.
Well, you're reliving it.
Yeah, exactly, you're reliving it again and again, and so it's eventually be like, oh, this part's really boring, or this is just, this is BS, I don't believe this is, So it sharpens you, I think.
It's like repeated polishing.
Yeah, and that's what it's about. That's why it's tedious. It's like, I think a lot of people think I wrote this and just wrote it, and no, I'm done. No, I had to go through it so many times to the point where I couldn't recognize it anymore. Like I read it so many times. It's like bleh. So.
So having been through both your first novels, well, not your first published novels,
Right.
are you ready to do it again?
Oh, yeah, of course. I just finished up, I just went back to grad school too, and I just finished my master's in English literature. I graduated on May 20th. So on top of doing this, and thank you, and that, I haven't been writing very much in the past couple months, so I'm just getting ready to, I've kind of set this day as the day of when now, after this, I'm gonna start writing again. Now I can let this go and move forward onto something else. But I do have a novel that I need to edit, and then I have one that I've started, and then that's what I'm gonna focus on over the next year or so. And I'm always writing short stories, so.
Cool. How about you, Michael?
I'm in no rush. It's I found it very difficult, and I'm not saying you didn't.
Yeah.
Everyone, I think, finds it difficult, but I'm also just in I'm in a different place. Like a lot of the years I was writing, I was pretty much, this is when I have one child, he's 3, and since that's happened, and anyone, can probably relate, I'm booked, I'm very, and it's very hard, and I'm not good about, like, some writers can spend 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and I'll do it in the car or when I'm parked here, but like I really need to I would always need to set aside these 4-hour blocks and just focus and not have any distractions whatsoever. It was very specific, so I'm having I'm having a very hard time figuring out how to incorporate it into my life again, and so I could see myself going to short stories, which is where I'm more comfortable anyway, but I could see myself going there, one, because you can get them done. You can finish a product, without spending years on it. And I could wrap my mind around that, and I get a lot of satisfaction from that, where a book it's so open and overwhelming and daunting that mentally I don't think I could handle it right now. It would just be, I don't know when I would do it, and I'm sure I could, but I don't want to. So right now I'm not in a rush to write another book. But I've been out of the game for almost a year now, so I am edgy. I do wanna, you know, it calls me, so I have to. I'd like to get back to doing stories, and then who knows? But it's hard to predict. Like when I wrote my second book, the novella, this was in '05. Like I was done because that got rejected, and I didn't want to do this anymore. I was done. And if you told me then that I'd be here tonight with you with this, I'd be like, no, it's 5 years from now. It's no way. So I can never really tell what I'm gonna do.
And your son won't always be 3.
It feels like it. It won't end. So
3 is particularly difficult.
1 and 2 are no picnic either.
No.
So no, but he's healthy and happy, and I love him. So
Yeah.
I just like, you know, I like
Yeah.
spending the time.
That's
with
where
him.
you are right now.
Yeah, that's where I am, and it does feel like he'll be 3 forever, though. It's interesting. I always feel like this is it. You know, I can't imagine him being able and not needing me, but and then I'll probably be bummed out. So
And you've got so much more to go through.
Yes. Right.
then I'll start writing again. I'll have more free time, and I'll be.
Yeah, my son starts kindergarten in the fall, and I'm like, oh.
When you get a publisher or an agent, do they put pressure on you to start another one?
My agent, we've been together for 6 or 7 years, I think, and worked on a lot of projects together. It's a boutique agency. They're very small, but they do have big clients like Dennis Lehane and CJ Box and people like that, and then me, who nobody's ever heard of. She does not put pressure on me at all. She's a great person to work with, which is why I love working with her and why we're still together. I think, I don't know, some of the bigger agents, if you happen to be a commercial writer who has a very popular book, I think then they put pressure on you, and especially now with all of the e-publishing and e-readers and stuff, I've read that some writers are getting pressured to put out a book a year or even fewer, less time in between. But that's not for me as a literary writer. I don't get that pressure at all. It's like, oh well, yay, you did this. That's great. We made a miracle happen. But we're in it together as a team. More like she believes in me. So I don't know what your experience.
Yeah, it's the exact same. I mean, sometimes I wish there was more pressure because that would mean there's, it would force me to do
Right.
it. But
Something's
there's, I'm not making my agent a ton of money. I'm not making the publisher a ton of money. So really, the incentive's on me, and for me to decide to do it. She wants me to. She encourages me, the agent, and often would discourage me from continuing with the stories just because they're really hard to get out there. From her perspective, I totally get it. But it's really up to me. Yeah, I don't have the pressure. The pressure comes from here. If I did have pressure, I think yes, it's the commercial writer has
Right.
pressure, absolutely. I don't know what that would be like, but that would be then that's your job. This
Right.
isn't my own. This isn't all I do. If it was, it'd be different. But I've had 2 different agents, and the second time was the first go around was really pretty bad experience. They're both in New York. The second one, she's great. Like I just found the right woman. And the publisher and I, we have a relationship. It's like I don't agree with everything. For example, they priced this really high, and because they priced it so high, it's a hardcover. Hardcover is known as friends and family because that's the only people that buy them. So I'm glad it's hardcover. It's cool to have a hardcover. Like aesthetically, I appreciate it, and it's good enough for me. But when I took this into Gloucester to the bookstore on Main Street, and she's like, "What are you nuts? Who's gonna spend $28, which is high for a first time for a debut novelist?" I go, "I don't know. I don't have any control over it. I'm so and so what I've been doing, honestly, I bought them and I get a discount, and I sell them for $10, because honest, because you know what, I know I'm not making a profit. I spent more on publicists and other things. It's an investment the way I see it, because if I want people to read it, I got to sell it at a fair price, and the publisher is certainly not looking out for you know, I don't know why they price it so high. Like, it should be in the low 20s, I think, for a first-time
I
writer.
think it's like the printing cost, because I have
Yo.
I have a hardcover too,
Yeah.
and it's $27.95.
Yeah, no,
And
it's,
then, so she did hardcover just kind of for me and my family,
Yeah.
like a special edition, and also came out with paperback at
Yeah.
the same time. But it is like the printing.
yeah, no, I
cost,
understand, it's very,
but
very
it's so
expensive.
expensive,
But,
yeah.
you know, but try, you know, the bookstore that has enough trouble these days.
Right, and then you
Yeah.
can't sell enough copies to make it less,
Right,
right?
no.
Because if you're selling, yeah.
So, yeah, I have to do it on
Do
consignment.
they do a paperback too? Or?
No, they didn't do a paperback, they did, it's on Kindle. It
Oh,
came
well,
out on,
that's
which
good.
is great, but you know, not everyone, you know, yeah, but I did want Kindle, because most people actually, a lot of people I know, that's where they are. Like, oh, tell me when it comes out on Kindle, tell me when it comes out on
A
Kindle.
lot of mine are
So I had to really
sold on
push
Kindle,
for it, yeah.
Ebook, no.
Because then it's like, how much? It's only, it's so cheap.
Yeah, $9.99.
Yeah, and people could share their Kindles easily, not that, you know, we don't get any money from it, but, you know, but.
Janine's up.
Right.
But that's the thing, that's
Yeah,
why,
readings,
that's why I
sure.
take it, when I go to readings, I say it's $10 or something, because I just want someone to have it, and I almost feel bad charging someone that spends $28, even though I'm paying for it. But I just think it's, yeah, so little things like that, but you have no say with the publisher, you know, at least I didn't. So there were certain things I didn't agree with, but you can't really fight too hard, I mean, I don't really have, I don't have a lot of leeway, you know, I don't wanna make them upset and then I have nothing. But they controlled the cover, but I loved the cover, so I was very lucky. I was really stressed out about that. I've heard some horror stories about covers, and you have no say, and that's really hard, I think, because you put all this time and effort into it. If you don't like your cover, that's sort of the introduction. It's like, ugh, you know, that'd be really depressing to me, but.
And so people see, I mean, not that you judge a book by its cover, but.
They do.
You do.
They do, and, you know, so I was really worried about that. Because I know someone whose cover really hurt their book, in fact, and they actually ended up changing it. Do you know Jenna Blum?
That name's familiar. Yeah.
She wrote Those Who Save Us. You know, she's from Boston. It's a story about, it's like a Holocaust story, but the cover was of a concentration camp, which just was really upsetting to a lot of
Yeah.
people, and so it just didn't do well. It wasn't like, oh, let me read that. That looks uplifting. And so they changed the cover, and it did a lot better. But anyway, yeah. So I forget what the question was, but.
Well, my experience too is with a small publisher, but she wrote into the contract that I could have say over the
Nice,
cover.
yeah.
And so, and she's very reasonable, and she's a writer herself, and she went to Purdue, and they have this great program for writing students who also learn about publishing. So everything that's in this book, physically, other than my words, she's done. She did the cover, the layout, the design of everything, and then so she gave me 3 choices, and she would have gotten more, but this is the one that I liked the best. So I was happy about that, and it's wonderful to work with somebody who I really like as a human being too, and we have a relation. Again, for me, it's like about the relationships with the people, because I know I'm not going to become a millionaire doing this, nor that's not why I'm in it. Really a passion for me, so. To have that relationship and to get my story out there and to know that that the people behind me care about it as much as I do is really important to me. I would be sad if they didn't, and that's some of the things I hear from other friends who maybe work with the bigger publishers where it's more of a business, you know, it's all a business and we're all, you know, we're helping other people with their business and they're helping us, but this is, and I'm sure with yours too, it's like a passion for the people involved. And that's what makes me feel good about it too. Like we all care about it, all of us who've had a hand in it.
Michael, you said that you scheduled 4 hours of time for writing, and I can understand that. Do you schedule also?
Well, I'm at home with my child.
Oh, that's fine. That's
So
fine.
that means I don't have very much time at all.
4 hours.
And he's in my brain when he's not physically in front of me. So I do it come as catch can. Like Michael said, and which I related to, I've never been a write every day person, at least not write every day. You know, try and write some story every day. I do write something every day, whether it's a blog post or something in my journal, whatever, but I'm not always working on a project every day. When I have a project that I'm working on, I'm pretty passionate about it, and then I will take as much time as I can get. When my son's in preschool now, so during that time, I'm not very good at night, my brain shuts down, so that's hard for me. On the weekend, you know, when my husband's there, and if I could steal a couple hours there, I'm a really fast writer, and then I'm pretty good at editing quickly, but it's really like getting as many quality hours as I can. I just can't schedule.
Right. Do either of you find that there are times when something comes into your head, aha, a good idea, and you have to go write it down, or?
Well, usually that's at a really inopportune time, like when, you know, I'm driving or something, and then, you know, I'm post 40, so as soon as the thought comes into my mind, if I don't write it down, then it's gone, because I can't remember what I'm doing from one room to the next. So, yes, that happens, and I think when my mind is most fertile is just when I wake up in the morning, and when I'm most exhausted too, and so I try to keep a pen and paper by my bed, but then I can't read my own handwriting, so that's a problem. I should probably get one of those tape recorders, but yeah, absolutely, that kind of, and also I think exercise brings it out, like I run, so that's when I get a lot of ideas. But then again, by the time I get home, they're gone, but they will come back. That's when I try to do something like spend half an hour free writing, and then I can maybe get it back that way.
Yeah, very similar. Like I have a file that's just called ideas, and every little thing, like I could overhear something in line at Dunkin' Donuts that's just started striking, like just a dialogue especially, or I could witness something or see an image, and I always write them down. And now with this iPhone thing, I have a file on here, I always write it down. So it's like it has a recorder, so I always have, because I'm the same way, I'll forget. I always say, oh, I won't forget tomorrow, I won't forget, and I will. So I have a file with all these, I have like some great ideas, but sometimes great ideas don't become great stories or something. It's like the greatest idea, but I can't make it into the story. You know, usually it'll be something more mundane. But yeah, it's important for me to jot it down, because you'll never know when you could use it. It could be like years later that a piece of, like this book has stuff in it that's been in my head for ages. So whenever I'm going through a story, I'll consult that ideas folder and see if I could input anything into a certain scene, and you know, that's how it goes. So I don't write every day, but I'm collecting every day.
Right.
Any other questions?
I have a story.
Hmm?
I have a story,
Okay.
and you brought it to mind. I heard that there was a writer whose husband was very generous, and she said things very similar to what both of you said, about not being able to remember what you had this fantastic idea. Except she had her fantastic ideas in the morning just before she woke up. And so he said, I'll get you a tape recorder, and when you get up, you can talk into it. In fact, sometimes you talk in your sleep. I'll get a tape recorder that comes on when you speak. It would be sound, triggered. And so they did. They got the tape recorder and they set it up on the headboard of the bed. And the first morning that she listened to it, she heard hours of her husband snoring. And nothing of her brilliant ideas.
In my house. Oh, that's awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
They have books to sell. We know Michael's is $10.
Mine's $10 too.
Oh.
That's awesome. And also, if I'm a new publisher, have volunteer donate $1 for every book to the library for every book they sell.